The job was supposed to save me. That was the lie I told myself when I took it. Not that it would fix my life. I wasn't stupid enough to believe that, but I thought maybe it would quiet things down, strip the world back to something simple. One tower, one radio, one pair of binoculars, trees in every direction. Long days, cold nights, no traffic, no neighbors, no one asking questions I didn't want to answer. Just watch for smoke, log the weather, report anything unusual. That was the official description. The unofficial one came from the ranger who drove me up the mountain on my first day. His name was Colin. Mid-50s, red nose, hands like driftwood. The kind of man who looked permanently annoyed by being alive. He kept both hands on the wheel as we climbed the dirt road through the trees. "You worked a tower before?" he asked. "No." "You afraid of heights?" "Not enough to matter." He grunted, like that was an acceptable answer. The road narrowed as we climbed. Pines closed around us. Fog hung in strips between the trunks. The mountain looked dead in that strange way old forests do, ancient, quiet, thick with the feeling that something is always watching even when nothing moves. When the tower finally appeared, it startled me. It stood on a bald shoulder of the mountain where the trees gave way to rock and scrub. A narrow metal skeleton with a glass cabin at the top. It looked too thin to trust, too lonely to be real. The wind hit it constantly. Even from below, I could hear it humming through the beams. Colin killed the engine but didn't get out right away. "You'll get one weather report at 6, one check-in at 9, one at midnight," he said. "Generator kick's weird, but it works. Water tank's half full. Propane's topped off. Radio battery's fresh." He finally looked at me. "If you see light in Sector 8 after sunset, call it in. Don't try to identify it yourself." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He didn't. "Sector 8, I repeated. He pointed west, beyond the dark sea of trees below the ridge. "There's nothing out there but burned land and old service roads. No active station. No campers allowed. No towers." He held my gaze a moment longer. "If you see a light there anyway, report it. Then close the west blinds." That left a small cold space under my ribs. "What kind of light?" "Any kind." He got out then, and I followed him up the stairs. The climb was worse than it looked. The metal steps rang under our boots, and the whole structure shifted slightly with the wind. By the time we reached the cabin, my legs felt hollow. Inside it was smaller than I expected. Just enough room for a cot, a desk, a propane stove, shelves of supplies, a radio unit, a map table, and windows on all 4 sides. The place smelled like dust, cold metal, and old coffee. Colin showed me the logbook, the weather instruments, the emergency flare gun, and the lockbox with first aid supplies. Then he stood at the west windows and pulled the blinds down halfway. "Only fully close these if you see it," he said. "See what?" But he was already moving away from the question. At the door, he paused. "One more thing. If anyone calls you from Tower 2, he hesitated. "You don't answer, unless I confirm it first." I stared at him. "There is no Tower 2? "Correct." He shut the door behind him and went down the stairs. I watched from the window as his truck disappeared into the trees below. After that, there was only the wind. That first evening was almost peaceful. The forest spread around me in all directions like an ocean made of needles and shadow. Sunset turned the hills copper, then purple, then blue-black. I made coffee on the stove, wrote my first weather entry in the logbook, and checked the radio every 15 minutes, even though it remained stubbornly silent. At 9, dispatch checked in. A woman named Mara. Flat voice, no wasted words. Tower 4, status, I answered. Tower 4, all clear. Visibility? Good. Any traffic? No. A pause. Then, if you receive communication from Tower 2, do not acknowledge. Log the time only. I sat up straighter. Why? Silence long enough that I thought she'd cut out. Then, repeat instruction. I repeated it. Good, she said, and the line died. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of fear, not yet. Mostly because every sound was unfamiliar. The creak of the tower in wind, the ping of cooling metal, the brush of branches far below. Around 2 in the morning, I thought I heard footsteps on the stairs and nearly grabbed the flare gun, but it turned out to be sleet hitting the underside of the platforms. By morning, I felt ridiculous. The next 2 days settled into routine. Wake at 6, take weather readings, check for smoke, sweep the horizon with binoculars once every hour, log everything, talk to dispatch at 9 and midnight, heat canned food, read whatever books the last watcher had left behind, sleep badly. No lights in Sector 8, no strange calls, no footsteps. I began to think the warnings were just station folklore. Small rituals built around boredom and isolation. The sort of nonsense lonely people feed to each other because a story is easier to carry than silence. On the 4th day, I found the old notebooks. They were in a lower cabinet beneath spare filters and a rusted kettle. 5 black field journals held together with twine. Different handwriting. Different dates. The earliest was from 1989, the latest from 6 years ago. I shouldn't have read them. That thought came much later. At the time, it just seemed like a way to pass the hours. Most entries were what you'd expect. Weather logs, complaints about storms, notes about bears, mechanical failures, boredom, but every notebook, eventually, changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, just a subtle shift. A mention of lights west, then radio interference after midnight, then saw movement in Sector 8 where no trees should be. In the notebook, from 1997, the handwriting turned cramped and uneven around the last third. Night 11. Light again in the west. Steady white this time, same height as my tower lamp. There is no tower there. I know there is no tower there. Kept blinds down. It still felt like something was looking back. The last line on the final page read, "If they tell you to answer Tower 2, they are not who they say they are. No signature, no explanation, just that." I closed the notebook and sat very still while the wind pressed at the windows. That night, at 11:43 p.m., I saw the first light. It was exactly where Colin had said it would be. Sector 8, west. At first, I thought it was a plane low on the horizon, but it didn't move. It hung there above the black line of the forest. Small, white, unwavering. Too low to be a star. Too steady to be lightning. I stood at the west window for a full minute before remembering the instruction. Then I snatched up the radio. "Dispatch, Tower 4. I have a light in Sector 8. Static answered. I tried again. Nothing. The light remained. Something about its steadiness was wrong, not natural wrong, intentional wrong, like a window with someone standing behind it. My hands had started sweating. I grabbed the blind cord and pulled the west blinds all the way shut. The cabin dimmed immediately. I moved to the east side and kept the radio clutched close, listening to static hiss like distant breathing. At midnight, Mara finally came on. Tower 4, status, I nearly shouted back. I had a light in Sector 8, I reported it. No answer. A pause. Then, did you close the blinds? Yes. Good. What is it? Another pause. Probably atmospheric refraction. That's not what you think. No, I said. It looked like a lamp at tower height. The radio crackled. Do not reopen the west blinds until daylight, she said. Log the sighting and continue normal operation. Before I could argue, the line went dead. I did what she said. But I didn't sleep at all, because sometime around 2:10 in the morning, through the closed west blinds, I saw another light. Not from outside, from inside the cabin. A pale vertical strip on the floorboards near the west wall, as if the blinds weren't fully closed. I stared at it for several seconds, confused, until I realized what I was seeing. It wasn't coming through my blinds. It was coming through another set of blinds, from the opposite side, as if there were windows just beyond the wall of my cabin, lined up perfectly with mine, and someone over there had left a narrow gap. I backed away so fast I hit the desk. The strip of light remained for maybe 10 seconds, then vanished. The next morning I went outside and inspected the west side of the tower like an idiot, clinging to the rail while wind shoved at my back. Nothing. Just air and 1,000 feet of empty slope. No second structure, no hidden platform, no possible source for light beyond the wall. I considered asking Colin to come get me that day. I didn't. Pride, mostly. Also fear of sounding insane. On the 5th day, fog rolled in so thick I could barely see beyond the tower's base. The world became a white void. The isolation felt heavier in fog, like the mountain itself had been erased and only the tower remained. At 6:17 p.m., the radio clicked on by itself. Not dispatch, not static. A man's voice, thin, distorted. Close enough to feel in my teeth. Tower 4, do you have visual on me? I sat frozen at the desk. The voice continued. Tower 4, respond. I have visual on your lamp. I knew before I looked what I would see. I looked anyway. The fog to the west had thinned just enough to reveal a shape. Another tower. Same height. Same skeletal frame. Same cabin at the top. Standing impossibly in the white distance where nothing had been the day before. One lamp glowed in its cabin. My knees almost went out. The radio crackled again. Tower 4? I swallowed. Who is this? A pause. Then, Tower 2. No. Everything in me tightened. There was no Tower 2. I reached to switch off the unit, but his next words stopped me. You shouldn't have opened the notebooks. Cold flooded my arms. I stared into the fog at that impossible tower. Who are you? The voice came back, warped by static. But I could hear something beneath it now. Panic. Listen carefully. Don't let them move you to the night rota. What? Once they say you're on nights, you stop seeing morning. Don't answer if Mara calls you after 1. Don't. The radio burst into shrieking feedback so violent I threw it down. When the static cleared, Mara's voice came through clean and calm. Tower 4. Do not respond to unauthorized traffic. I couldn't stop staring west. The other tower was gone. Fog, trees, nothing else. I licked dry lips. What is happening up here? No answer. Mara? Report your heart rate, she said. What? Approximately. My pulse thudded painfully in my throat. I don't know. Fast. Any nausea? Yes. Visual distortion? I saw a tower where there isn't one. A pause. Then, that counts as yes. I gripped the edge of the desk. What is this place? Mara exhaled softly into the microphone. For the first time, she sounded tired. There was a fire line out west 19 years ago. Burned for 6 days. Took a crew with it. When the wind shifted, static hissed. Afterward, some of the survivors reported structures where none existed. Lights, radios, voices from stations that had been decommissioned before they were born. I couldn't speak. She continued. Most of it stops if protocol is followed. Most of it. A long silence. Then, keep your blinds closed after dark. Do not acknowledge Tower 2. Do not let anyone onto the stairs after sunset unless you can identify them in daylight. If you hear yourself calling from outside, another pause. Do not go to the window. The transmission ended. I sat there, in the dim cabin, with fog pressing white against every pane, and thought about driving down the mountain in the dark, whether they approved it or not. Then the generator coughed and died. Everything went black. The silence that followed was total. No hum, no radio, just wind. I found the emergency lantern by touch and got it lit with shaking hands. It cast a weak yellow pool that made the cabin corners look deeper than they should have been. Outside the windows, the fog glowed faintly. Then something tapped on the west glass. Once, soft, like a fingernail. I didn't breathe. Another tap. Then clear as anything, my own voice from outside. Open up. I sat petrified. The voice came again, irritated this time. Don't be stupid. The stairs gave out. I need the latch. My scalp prickled. It sounded exactly like me. Not similar, not close. Exact. I stared at the west blinds, closed tight against the window. The latch he meant was the outer maintenance hatch beside the west rail. If someone were somehow outside on the platform, I could open it from inside. But no one could be outside. Not in fog that thick. Not on that side. Not after dark. Hey, my voice said softly, from the other side of the blind. I know you can hear me. 3 slow knocks followed. Not on the window, on the cabin door, from the east side. I whipped around. Silence, then footsteps on the stairs below. Metal ringing under weight. Slow, steady, coming up. A second set started a beat later. 1 on the west stairs, 1 on the east. That was impossible. There was only 1 staircase. My lantern shook in my hand. I moved backward until the desk hit my thighs. The steps stopped just outside the door. Then someone tried the handle. Once. Twice. Then my voice from immediately outside said, very gently, if you don't let me in before the fog clears, you'll see how many of us there are. The handle stopped moving. Nothing for several seconds. Then the radio, dead minutes earlier, clicked on. Colin's voice burst through in a hiss of static. Do not open that door. I lunged for the set so hard I nearly tipped the chair. Colin, I'm below the ridge. Generator'll come back in a minute. Listen to me. Whatever's on the landing is not alone. The thing outside the door laughed. My laugh. It took you long enough, it said. Something scraped across the glass on the north side, then the south. Slow dragging sounds like nails on window frames. My skin went hot, then cold. Colin kept talking fast. When the generator kicks in, you'll have full cabin lights for about 20 seconds before it stabilizes. You need to look west exactly once. Confirm whether the lamp is on. What lamp? In the other tower. I nearly screamed. There isn't another tower. Then say that, he snapped. But look. The generator roared back to life so suddenly. The lantern dimmed. Lights flashed overhead. And all around the cabin, against every window, shapes leaned close. Not 1, not 2. At least 6 figures ringed the glass. All of them me. Same face, same clothes, same terrified expression. except for one at the west window, where the blinds had somehow lifted an inch. That one was smiling. Beyond him, out in the fog, another tower stood with its lamp burning white, and in its west window I saw someone standing at the glass, watching me, also me. The power dipped, the blinds slapped down. Darkness jumped, then steadied. I made a sound I'm not proud of. Colin's voice came thin through the radio. "Is the lamp on?" "Yes." Static swallowed a curse. "Then you're already late," he said. Outside, every version of me began knocking at once. Not hard, not frantic, measured, rhythmic, like they all knew exactly how much time they had. I clutched the radio. "Late for what?" "For handover." The words meant nothing, but the fear in his voice did. "Listen, in the lower cabinet, there's an old brass key taped under the shelf. Find it." I dropped to my knees, ripping open the cabinet. My fingers closed on tape, then metal. "What does it do?" "Under the cot," Colin said. "There's a trap hatch. You open it, only if the lamp is on and they start speaking in your voice." The knocking stopped all at once. Then, from every side of the cabin, my voice whispered in perfect unison. We already did. The radio shrieked. Then Mara came on, too clear, too loud. "Tower 4, she said. "Midnight transfer approved. Open the hatch." Colin shouted over her. "That is not dispatch." The same female voice came again, but now from outside the west blind as well as the radio. "Open the hatch," Mara repeated. "You've been on nights longer than you remember." My vision tunneled. I backed away from the cot like it might bite. "What hatch?" No one answered immediately. Then the thing at the west window spoke softly, close enough to hear its mouth shape the words. "The one that lets you go back down." I should have ignored it. Instead, in a moment of pure panic, I dropped to the floor and yanked the cot aside. There was a square iron hatch set into the cabin floor beneath it, no larger than a crawl-space door. I had slept 3 feet from it for 5 nights, or maybe longer. Something hammered against it from below. Once, then again. My blood turned to ice. Colin was shouting my name through the radio, but his voice sounded far away now. The figures at the windows had gone silent, waiting. The hatch thudded a 3rd time. Then a voice came from beneath it. My own voice. Not mocking, not smiling, exhausted, ragged with terror. "Please," it whispered, "don't let them put me back." I stared at the hatch. Another hit from below, hard enough to rattle the bolts. Colin's voice cut through the static in a roar. "Do not open it unless you know which one of you is speaking." How am I supposed to know? No answer. Only wind, knocking glass, my own breathing. Then the voice beneath the hatch said something none of the others could have known. My sister used to leave the porch light on when thunderstorms scared me. My mouth fell open. I had never told anyone here about my sister. The voice went on, faster now, desperate. You took this job because you needed somewhere the hospital couldn't call you. You still have the voicemail from the day she died because you can't delete her voice. It's in the drafts folder because you can't listen to it either. Every word hit like a blow. Outside the windows, all the smiling versions of me became still as statues. Then one of them, the one at the west blind, spoke in a tone almost kind. We know that, because it happened to all of us. The hatch banged again. The thing below shouted, "They make you keep watch until someone newer arrives. That's why they want the blind shut. That's why there are notebooks. Open the hatch and kill the lamp before dawn." The lamp in the other tower flared brighter through the gap in the blind. I looked west, despite myself. In that far cabin, the figure watching me lifted one hand and slowly pointed down, at my hatch. Then all 6 versions of me at the windows smiled wider. "Too late," they said together. Something on the hatch began turning the bolts from the inside. I moved without thinking. I jammed the brass key into the lock. The floor shuddered under my knees. The figures outside the windows lurched all at once, hands flattening against the glass. Their mouths opened, not to shout, but in sudden fear. The hatch snapped loose. It flew open. A hand shot up and seized my wrist. It was my hand. Cold, filthy, flesh, scraped, raw, but mine. I screamed and pulled, but the grip only tightened. Then a face rose out of the dark beneath the floor. Mine again. Only older somehow. More worn. Eyes red-rimmed from sleeplessness. Beard grown longer than mine. A scar across the chin I didn't have. Not yet. He looked at me with such naked horror that every instinct in me flipped. "Don't let sunrise hit the west glass," he gasped. The things outside hit every window at once. The cabin exploded with sound. Glass boomed inward. Frames screamed. The tower swayed violently. One west blind tore free and slapped upward, revealing the other tower in full for the first time. It was not on the mountain. It stood in a black space where the forest should have been, as if the land between us had been cut out. No trees, no ridge, just emptiness, and that impossible second tower balanced over it. And in its lit cabin, dozens of figures crowded the glass. All me, all watching. The older me dragged himself halfway out of the hatch. "Listen to me. At dawn, one tower keeps the day, and one keeps the night. If you look at them, when the sun hits..." The cabin door burst inward. A version of me stepped through. Then another behind him. Then another. Not running, not jerking like monsters in movies. Calm, patient, certain. Their faces were mine except for the eyes, too reflective, as if each iris held a tiny lamp. The first one smiled at me. "You've had enough rest." The older me yanked me backward toward the hatch. "Down!" We dropped through just as hands snatched at my jacket. I expected rock or support beams below. Instead, there was a narrow metal ladder descending inside the tower's hollow core, deeper than the base should have allowed. Cold air rushed upward, carrying the smell of wet ashes and old smoke. Above us, the hatch slammed shut. The older me kept climbing down. "Who are you?" I shouted. He didn't look up. "Night watch." "That means nothing." "It will." We descended far too long. The ladder seemed endless, the metal biting my palms, darkness swallowing our light. At some point I realized I could still hear the tower above us, groaning in the wind, even though we should have been underground by then. Finally, the ladder ended at a concrete room lit by a single hanging bulb. There were shelves of canned food, water drums, a cot, logs piled in a corner. On the wall, scratched into the concrete, hundreds of times in different hands, were the same words. "Do not let dawn choose for you." The older me shut a steel door at the base of the ladder and dropped the bar across it. Only then did he turn to face me fully. Up close, he looked like me after months of sleep deprivation and grief sharpened into bone. He was perhaps 10 years older, perhaps 10 days. Time had gone strange around him. "You're me," I said. He nodded once. "From when?" A thin smile that wasn't really a smile. "Depends which tower you ask." My stomach rolled. He sat on the cot heavily, as if he'd been standing for years. "There used to be just one tower. Fire took the western ridge, took crew, took a station. After that, the mountain kept the watch even when no one was there to keep it. I shook my head. That makes no sense. No, he agreed. But it's true. He pointed upward. Every few years somebody sees the west lamp. If they acknowledge it, the second tower gains a little more shape, a little more history, a little more right to exist. Eventually, dispatch starts training people for both without admitting it. Mara knows? He laughed once, bitterly. Mara changes. Colin changes. Some are real longer than others. He rubbed his eyes. The mountain wants a witness. If one tower stands empty, it reaches across and makes another. If both have watchers at dawn, it chooses. Chooses what? Who stays in daylight? Who keeps watch in the dark until someone else comes? Something pounded once on the steel door above us. Not from the ladder side. From the concrete wall beyond it. I jumped. He barely reacted. They'll try voices first, he said. Then memories. Then pity. As if on cue, my sister's voice drifted down through the metal, soft, fragile, exactly as I remembered it from the saved voicemail I'd never been able to erase. Open the door, she said. I'm cold. I covered my ears. No. The older me looked at me steadily. Good. I wanted to cry. Instead, I asked, How long have you been down here? He considered. 9 dawns that I remember. Maybe more. He pointed to the scratched wall. You forget after a while, that helps them. We sat in silence while voices moved above us. My sister, my mother, Colin, Mara. Then my own voice, younger, terrified, begging. At some point, darkness beyond exhaustion settled over me. I must have drifted, because the older me was shaking my shoulder when I opened my eyes. The east wall, he said. Look. There was a crack in the concrete, hair-thin, running floor to ceiling. Through it, leaked pale light. Dawn. He handed me the brass key. You have to choose before the first direct sun. Choose what? He stood. Go back up. Open either the east door or the west blinds. Not both. East means you keep this tower and the day. West means you take the other tower and release whoever's there. My hand tightened around the key. You. Yes. And if I do nothing? His expression hollowed. Then they choose. And there will be more than 2 towers next time. The pounding above us resumed. Harder now. He stepped aside from the ladder. Go. I climbed. Every rung felt heavier than the last. My shoulders burned. My lungs scraped. When I reached the hatch, sunlight was already bleeding around its edges. The moment I lifted it, wind slammed into me carrying 1,000 whispered versions of my own voice. The cabin was wrecked. One window blown inward, blinds torn, log papers everywhere. The west blind hung by one bracket, half-twisted, leaving just enough gap to let a blade of dawn reach across the floor. The figures were gone. But the other tower still stood in the void west of mine, lamp burning white. And in its cabin, crowded against the glass, were faces. Not all mine anymore, some older, some younger, some not me at all. Watchers, hands flat to the panes, waiting. My radio crackled. Mara, calm as ever. Tower 4, open west, transfer approved. Then Colin, over her, open east and burn the logbooks. Then my sister, somehow through both. Please. I stood between the east door and west windows, with the key cutting into my palm. If I opened east, I kept this tower, kept daylight, kept whatever version of life still belonged to me. Left the older me, left all of them, in that other tower. If I opened west, I let the night tower take me, and maybe set them free. Maybe. Or maybe that was exactly what it wanted. Sunlight brightened by the second. The blade on the floor stretched longer. The lamp in the other tower flared. In its window, the older me appeared now, somehow there as well as below. No, another version of him, thinner, desperate. He hit the glass with both hands and screamed something I couldn't hear. My knees weakened. Then I saw the notebooks on the floor, pages fluttering in the draft from the broken window. One page had opened to a line I didn't remember reading before, written in furious block letters. They all beg to be the one who leaves. The true test is which side asks you to look at it. I stared at the West Tower. It wanted witness, wanted acknowledgement, wanted me to look. The east door behind me rattled once in the wind, nothing more, not asking. I moved. In one motion, I grabbed the fuel can from beside the stove, doused the logbooks and curtains, and struck a match from the emergency kit. Flame caught fast. Heat raced up the west wall. The radio screamed. Outside, the impossible tower's lamp blinked once, then again. I kicked the burning curtains against the west windows, pulled the east door open, and threw myself onto the platform as smoke rolled across the cabin ceiling. Behind me, every glass pane shattered inward. I didn't look west. I kept my face east, into the sunrise, while the tower burned and the metal groaned beneath me. For a moment I heard hundreds of fists pounding from somewhere very far away. Then a long, impossible shriek, like steel being torn in half. Then wind. Only wind. By the time Colin's truck reached the ridge road, the cabin was a blackened shell. He found me sitting on the east stairs in ash up to my elbows, staring at the sunrise like I'd forgotten what it was. He didn't ask many questions, just wrapped a blanket over my shoulders and led me down. Halfway to the truck, I made him stop. From the ridge, the western horizon was visible through a break in the smoke. There was no second tower, no void, just forest, burned land, morning haze. I started laughing then, hard enough to scare myself. Colin let me. At the base of the mountain, Mara met us in a jeep. She looked exactly how she'd sounded on the radio, gray-eyed, tired, impossible to read. She took my statement on a clipboard without once suggesting I was crazy. At the end, she asked only one question. When the cabin lit, did you see how many windows were occupied? I stared at her. How many? She didn't blink. Enough. They paid me for the full month anyway. I went home 2 days later. I deleted my application emails, burned the map Colin had marked for me, and told myself the whole thing had ended with the tower. For a while, I almost believed it. Then the package arrived. No return address, brown paper wrapping, postmarked from nowhere I recognized. Inside was a single object, a black field journal. Not one of the old ones from the tower. A new one. Empty, except for the first page. In my handwriting, though I had never written it. Night 1. Lamp, visible east. There should not be a tower there. Under that, a second line had been added more recently. The pen dug so hard, it nearly tore the page. If you are reading this in daylight, do not answer when Tower 4 calls you by name. Last night, at 12:03 a.m., my phone rang. No caller ID. I answered before I remembered the warning. There was only wind for a few seconds. Then the thin, exhausted voice of a man who sounded exactly like me said, "I can see your porch light from here." I hung up. I unplugged every lamp in the house. I closed every blind. It didn't matter. Because just before dawn, from the second-floor window facing east, I saw it. A small white light, far away, steady, at the height of a tower cabin, And when I forced myself not to look directly at it, I noticed something worse. There was another light beside it, and another, and another, like a line of towers, slowly switching on one by one in the dark.